Dustin shocked me because we were shooting a scene.
Yes, look, you're gonna have to.
Very sorry about this.
My wine glass was sitting there and he rushed it so that it whizzed by my nose and broke on the wall, and little pieces of glass.
She's won 3 Oscars. She's been nominated more than 20 times. Critics have called her the greatest living actress of our time. But even Meryl Streep has her breaking point. Now at 76, she's done staying silent. After decades of working alongside Hollywood's biggest names, she's finally revealing the 6 actors she hated working with the most. No more polite smiles in interviews. No more carefully worded answers to protect fragile egos. Meryl is naming names, and the stories behind them are more shocking than you could ever imagine. From unbearable egos to behind-the-scenes drama that never made the headlines, these are the co-stars who pushed her patience past the breaking point. And wait until you hear who made the very top of the list. Number
Dustin
1, Hoffman. In 1979, Kramer vs. Kramer wasn't just another film. It became a cultural touchstone. It redefined courtroom drama, changed the way movies portrayed parenting, and captured the raw emotional fallout of divorce in a way no one had seen before. On screen, Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman were electric. Their performances were so raw, so painfully believable, that the film swept the Oscars. But what the audience didn't see was the storm brewing behind the scenes. This wasn't just creative tension, it was personal, and it started from the very first day. Meryl was still a newcomer to film, still grieving the loss of her fiancé, John Cazale, and trying to hold her own in a male-dominated industry that rarely showed patience for women, especially young ones. Hoffman, already a Hollywood heavyweight, was deep in his method acting. But for him, the method wasn't just blurring the line between character and actor. It was bulldozing right through it. It was my first movie, my first take in my first movie, and he just slapped me, Streep told the New York Times. You see it in the movie. It was overstepping. That slap wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. It was Hoffman trying to provoke a real reaction. And yes, it worked. The scene is unforgettable. But for Meryl, the cost was deeply personal, and that wasn't the only time he crossed a line. According to journalist Michael Schulman's biography, Her Again, Becoming Meryl Streep, Hoffman once whispered John Cazale's name into her ear just before filming a crucial courtroom breakdown. He knew exactly how fresh and raw her grief still was, and used it as a weapon to break her on camera. Another time, he smashed a wine glass without warning her, sending shards flying dangerously close. Meryl kept her composure, but later told him calmly, "Next time you do that, I'd appreciate you letting me know." Cinematographer Nestor Almendros summed it up perfectly. Meryl operates like a precision instrument, every gesture, every vocal shift, calculated. Dustin treats scenes like jazz, unpredictable, chaotic. To Hoffman, spontaneity was art. To Streep, it was recklessness, disguised as genius. Their philosophies clashed constantly. Director Robert Benton was forced to play peacekeeper, over the tension just enough to keep the film on track. The result? One of the most celebrated performances in cinema history, but at a cost no one watching could see. Hoffman never apologized. He's never publicly addressed the slap, the whisper, or the glass incident. The closest he came was years later, during a BAFTA tribute, when he said, "I was getting divorced. I'd been partying with drugs. It depleted me in every way." It wasn't an apology, it was context, maybe even an excuse. Streep eventually found a kind of closure. Decades later, during the press tour for The Post, she reflected on how the industry had changed. Those things are being corrected in this moment, because people won't accept it anymore. And that's a good thing. But the real surprise came in 2020. Appearing on Friday Night with Jonathan Ross, she softened. "All is forgiven. I really, really love him, and I think he's an amazing actor. But boy, I was mad that day." It was the first public sign that she'd moved on. Not because Hoffman had earned her forgiveness, but because time had dulled the rage. The memory remained. The scar remained. But the fire had cooled. Still, they never worked together again. No reunion films. No surprise collaborations. Just that one haunting masterpiece, and the lingering thought of what could have been, if respect had been part of the method. Because for Meryl Streep, art is sacred, but so is consent. and Dustin Hoffman crossed that line. Number 2. Kline. Meryl Streep builds characters like cathedrals, layer by layer, brick by brick, with the reverence of a historian and the sensitivity of a sculptor. She doesn't just play a role, she inhabits it. She learns its language, studies its history, and breathes in its every heartbeat until it becomes second nature. For her, precision isn't a preference, it's a principle. So when Kline walked onto the set of Sophie's Choice in 1981, with his effortless charm, breezy improvisations, and offhand brilliance, it wasn't sparks that flew, it was friction. Director Alan J. Pakula had imagined the pairing as a dream come true. Two classically trained actors, both steeped in the discipline of the stage, coming together to tell one of the most harrowing love stories of the Holocaust era. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable. Haunting, magnetic, unforgettable. But off-screen, it was a quiet collision of artistic philosophies. Meryl had built Sophie from the ground up. Every accent inflection, every physical nuance, every flicker of emotion was rooted in months of research. Production designer George Jenkins once said, "She studied Polish speech patterns down to the syllable. She didn't just wear the clothes, she wore the history." Kevin, by contrast, discovered his character, Nathan, through instinct. He played scenes like jazz, loose, spontaneous, shifting rhythms without warning. To Meryl, that looseness, however gifted, felt unmoored. The breaking point came during a private rehearsal. According to crew accounts, Kevin casually remarked, "Your accent work is so precise it's almost distracting." He may have meant it as a light comment, but to Meryl it was like striking at the heart of everything she stood for. "What you call distracting, I call essential," she reportedly shot back. "I'm not here to play Sophie. I'm here to be her." From that moment, the line was drawn. On set, they remained civil. They hit their marks, delivered their lines, and gave performances that would go down in film history. But the trust never formed. In later interviews, Kevin would reflect on Meryl's meticulous preparation with what some saw as faint praise. "Meryl's preparation is academic," he once said. "Brilliant, but sometimes it leaves less room for discovery." For Streep, that word, academic, wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal, a subtle undermining of her artistic philosophy, and she never forgot it. She didn't fire back publicly. She didn't call him out in interviews. Instead, she responded the way Meryl Streep always does, with strategic silence. During awards season, she never singled him out in praise. At industry events, she kept her distance. And in the decades since, the two have never worked together again. Kevin never apologized, perhaps because he never saw it as a feud. Maybe for him, it was simply two methods clashing in the chaos of creativity. But for Meryl, it was more than that. It was a violation of sacred ground, the space where preparation meets performance, where history meets humanity. Kevin Kline's improvisational instincts may have lit up the screen, but they left Meryl feeling exposed, unsupported, and ultimately disrespected. Today, when asked about their collaboration, Meryl chooses her words with surgical precision. "Kevin is a wonderful actor. We just have very different ways of getting to the truth." And she leaves it at that. Because Meryl Streep might forgive, she might even move on, but she never forgets. Number 3, Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson doesn't build characters. He channels them. He doesn't disappear into a role. He bends the role until it becomes him. The smirk, the voice, the swagger. When Jack walks on set, the charisma is the performance. To Meryl Streep, that wasn't just a difference in style. It was a breach of artistic integrity. Jack represents everything Meryl considers wrong with modern movie stardom. Casting director Juliet Taylor once said, "He's more interested in being Jack Nicholson than disappearing into the character." Their friction wasn't born out of petty rivalry. It was philosophical. In the early 1980s, both were at the height of their power. Studios dreamed of pairing them, but Meryl quietly turned down multiple high-profile scripts. The reason? She doubted Jack would ever put the story above the persona. That skepticism turned into discomfort in 1986 when they finally worked together on Mike Nichols' romantic dramedy, Heartburn. Streep had already been shaken by the sudden firing of her original co-star, Mandy Patinkin, after day one. She was blindsided when Jack replaced him, and almost immediately he became Jack. Off-screen, he was charming, magnetic, impossible to ignore, but also relentless. He flirted, he teased, he pushed personal boundaries, never crossing into scandal, but far enough to keep her constantly on guard. She had to fend him off, author Aaron Carlson revealed in Queen Meryl. What started as playful became persistent. On set, their working styles clashed like oil and water. Meryl arrived armed with months of emotional groundwork. Jack arrived armed with instinct and improvisation. Their scenes lacked the trust that fuels great chemistry. Privately, she confided to Nichols that Jack seemed less interested in the work than in the spotlight. Years later, she delivered what sounded like a subtle, razor-sharp jab. Some critics categorically refuse to believe Santa Claus is their dad with a beard, that Jack Nicholson is like Jack Nicholson. It was her way of saying some actors never disappear into the role. They just play themselves. Nicholson didn't care. He once dismissed method acting entirely, calling it intellectual masturbation. In Rolling Stone, he compared acting to sex. You just do it. To Meryl, that quote said everything. Their 1987 reunion in Ironweed was no warmer than their first film. They were polite, professional, but the spark never came. No public fights, no reconciliation, just an unspoken agreement. They'd never see the craft the same way. Today, Nicholson lives in quiet retirement. Streep still works, still prepares with the same discipline she's carried her entire career. She never names names when discussing actors who prioritize persona over preparation. She doesn't have to, because for Meryl Streep, Jack Nicholson belongs to myth, not history. Number 4, Alec Baldwin. In public, they laughed together. On talk shows, they played the perfect co-stars. But behind the scenes of It's Complicated, Meryl Streep and Alec Baldwin were anything but effortless. On screen, their chemistry was flawless. Off-screen, it was quietly volatile. For Meryl, acting is architecture. Every role is mapped with surgical detail. Accent, posture, breath, intention. Comedy isn't an accident for her. It's a blueprint. Every laugh must be earned from the truth of the character. Alec Baldwin is a hurricane. Quick, instinctive, unpredictable. On 30 Rock, he could improvise an entire scene in one take. But Meryl Streep isn't 30 Rock. The clash was immediate. Crew members described it as two musical geniuses in different genres. Meryl was Mozart. Alec was Miles Davis. Brilliant in their own ways, but impossible to sync without chaos. Rehearsals became battlegrounds of rhythm. Baldwin often went off script, rewriting punchlines, rephrasing dialogue, even shifting physical cues mid-scene. Streep, who had charted her character's emotional arc down to the breath, found herself derailed. One camera operator recalled, Alec would change a line mid-take and Meryl would just blink at him like, "Really? Now?" Her reactions were subtle, but sharp. She requested more rehearsal time. She asked for reshoots. She pushed to rebuild the structure of scenes Alec Baldwin had lived into chaos. The problem? Baldwin thought it was the process. Working with her was a dream come true, he later wrote on Instagram. She's beautiful. She's brilliant. She's fun. But insiders say that was Baldwin's charm doing post-production cleanup. On set, Streep was quietly exasperated. Not because Baldwin lacked talent. She'd admired his work for years, but his unpredictability forced her to compromise the meticulous blueprint she builds for every character. She never called him out publicly. That's not her style, but she didn't hide her feelings either. "You do the work," she once said in an interview. "You build the truth from the inside. The rest is noise." To her inner circle, that wasn't a generic comment. That was aimed at actors like Baldwin, those who lean on charisma instead of construction. And Baldwin? He didn't seem to mind. During a press junket, he joked, "She's a ball breaker, the Bette Davis of her generation. You don't walk on set unprepared with her, unless you want to get that stare." He meant it as praise. She didn't laugh. Yet despite the friction, It's Complicated was a commercial and critical success. But there was never a second film, no reunion project, Just polite interviews and photo ops that couldn't mask the creative disconnect? Was it a feud? Not in the headline-grabbing sense. There were no shouting matches, no walkouts, no public barbs. But there was a professional chasm, built on fundamentally different beliefs about what acting should be. To Baldwin, performance is play. To Streep, it's sacred labor. A crew member put it best: Meryl operates like an orchestra. If you're out of tune, she won't call you out, but you'll feel it. Baldwin still calls it one of his career highlights. Maybe not because it was easy, but because surviving it felt like an achievement. To this day, Streep has never requested Baldwin as a co-star again, and she never will. Number 5. Gwyneth Paltrow. For Meryl Streep, acting is a calling, a vocation rooted in discipline, obsession, and truth. It's not a performance for red carpets or a stepping stone to brand deals. It's sacred work. So when Gwyneth Paltrow arrived in Hollywood in the late 90s, armed with famous lineage, polished charm, and effortless poise, Streep didn't see a kindred spirit. She saw a warning sign. From that moment, the temperature in the room dropped to Arctic. They avoided each other at events. Their agents quietly ensured they were never in the same ensemble. And when asked at a festival which peers she most admired, Streep said she valued actors who surrender ego in service of the story, a line widely interpreted as aimed at Irons. Irons, never one to shy away from verbal sparring, told The Guardian, "Meryl is extraordinary, no doubt, but sometimes technique can be seductive. You start marveling at the skill instead of losing yourself in the character." For Streep, his style was emotionally cold. For Irons, hers was theatrical overreach disguised as depth. "It's tragic," one director said. "They could have created magic, but you can't build intimacy when actors don't trust each other's intentions." Alec Baldwin, who worked with both, put it bluntly on his podcast: "Meryl wants truth. Jeremy wants control. Brilliant, but impossible together." In recent years, time has softened the public edge of their rift, but not the core. They'll nod at award shows, pose for photos, exchange pleasantries. But insiders say the relationship remains exactly where it's been for decades: polite, professional, and utterly distant. Now it's your turn. Which of these feuds shocked you the most? Was Meryl justified in holding her ground, or was she too unforgiving? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're hooked on the hidden tensions behind Hollywood's brightest lights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more untold stories. Until next time.